Welcome to the More Than Just a Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Lil Suprenant, MD. I'm a life coach for physicians, a practicing hospitalist, a wife, a mom of 2 boys, a reader, a dancer, a dolphin enthusiast, and all the things. Just like me, you're more than just a doctor, and that's what we're going to talk about each week. Doctor stuff, regular life stuff, and all the things that make life rich and interesting. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. All right, welcome friends. It's episode number 10 of the More Than Just a Doctor podcast. I'm Lil Suprenant. Happy to have you here. Today is number 3 in the series about creating satisfaction at work. And I want to talk about the sweet spot of complaints. The sweet spot of complaining. So some people, as you know, are teetotalers on complaining. You know, you see this very austere advice to never complain, never utter anything negative, never gossip. Well, I think that is all bullshit. I actually think that some complaining can serve us in several different ways, but that there's a sweet spot. As with many, many things in life, there's a sweet spot. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to tell you a story. It's sort of related to complaining. But so I'm on a text thread with a few different people from work, and it's a multi-purpose thread. It's complaints, gossip, wildly inappropriate memes. Like it's a funny place to be. And someone just was doing a little minor complaint about Southwest. My friend had booked a flight that was direct, and Southwest just rebooked it. So now it's 2 stops. And he said the person on the phone doesn't understand why that would be a problem, which of course, we think is really funny. And it reminded me of this story, this episode about Southwest, and it's related to complaining a little bit. So this is maybe 10 years ago or 8 or something, but some number of years ago. I was in the Southwest spot in New York City. I think it's in LaGuardia. It's been a while since I've been. There's at the time, there was this tiny sort of hidden counter, and it was the Southwest spot. And I'm going, I think, back to Myrtle Beach, and the other flight is to Jamaica. And Southwest had delayed the flight to Jamaica. I was going to Myrtle Beach, but this is all going at the same time. They've delayed the flight to Jamaica something like 3 hours, and announced this. And these 3 ladies go and do what normal people do when your flight's delayed 3 hours, like they go to shop or get a bite to eat or whatever. And so I'm still sitting there waiting for my flight, maybe 45 minutes later. And Southwest changes the time to the Jamaica flight and says they're leaving in 15 minutes. And, I don't think this is probably before the time of everything's text updated or whatever. So they board the plane. Not these 3 ladies. The Southwest boards plane, and then maybe half an hour later, the 3 women come back, and the plane is gone. And they are rightly, so furious. How could this have happened? And the poor guy on the Southwest guy, he's probably getting paid $15 an hour back in the day. He has no power over anything. And he has the ire of these people. It was even worse because there was not a flight until a whole 24 hours later. And these women were going to a wedding. It was the craziest thing. So of course they were complaining. Sadly, I don't think their complaining probably got them anywhere. There was nothing to do. But that's it. The whole text thread reminded me of this crazy Southwest incident from some years ago. And so I know traveling can be challenging, and it's been really challenging lately. So anyway, there's my random Southwest story. So I want to talk about the sweet spot of complaining. Why do I think sometimes complaining there is an upside to it? Well, one of the things that I talk with you guys about on the regular so far in these 10 episodes is a sense of community and your relationships at work. And that's like really a huge part of the value. So, one of the things that some level of complaining gets us is that sense of community, like, oh, you too, like, I'm not crazy, like, this is a thing. An example of this is um, I was on service, hospitalist service, a couple of weeks ago, and I went to a pod that I had not worked at for quite some time, and they had changed it to geographic rounds, which, if you don't know, that's the concept where they try to bulk the patients in one spot for one doctor to increase efficiency and communication and blah, blah, blah. I don't love it. Part of what I like about work is running around up and down the stairs and all over the hospital, but be that as it may. So anyway, I'm like on a new revamped pod and working with a person that I had never encountered before in a critical role. We have like this morning meeting, and this person is, to help get the flow of patients leaving the hospital. And it was, it was a new to me, and it was so basically, I was like, holy shit, this is bad. And so I, went back to the office later in the day and I complained about it. And like it's kind of fun and reassuring. And I found out that I was not the only one. I had not lost my mind. Um, and so like that's the kind of dose of complaining that I think is useful and acceptable. We weren't being super mean. But it makes you feel, it gives you that camaraderie and shared experience. So that's one reason that I think a dose of complaining is useful. Sometimes complaining, if you haven't been complaining about something, you've just been taking it with that sort of stoic sense of, never complain. Sometimes you can find out that you have been tolerating something that is completely out of line with standards and, what the norm is. And if you don't complain to your colleagues and peers, and sometimes this is where like your online friends, like if you're in a community of physicians or whatever your work is, this is where you might find out that you're being paid way under market, or you're accepting clinical responsibilities and risk way out of proportion to your standards, or basically you've accepted some situation that is in fact not okay. And complaining in some form or fashion will often be the thing that helps you figure out that, oh, this is not okay. And the same thing, okay, this is not about work, but sometimes the same thing like when we're in a relationship. A lot of times we keep everything that's going on private, and that's appropriate to a point, but sometimes you get yourself in a situation where you are really being taken advantage of, or something's going on that you don't like. And one way to figure out that maybe it's like outside of okay is to complain to a friend. And you maybe wouldn't call this complaining, but yeah, complain to a friend. And that's another place where, there's a sweet spot of complaining. Like, you want to complain about your spouse, your romantic partner. Like, you may have, like, I have a friend or two who we sort of have some humorous exchanges back and forth. And it's so one, it's a thing for friendship, but it's also like a little bit of a release valve. Like, I get fussy or whatever and can jokingly complain to my friend who sort of gets it. And that actually takes some of the heat down, and and lets the relationship be better. So to me, this is another place where there's like a little sweet spot of complaining. And the other thing, this is along the same lines, just some level of complaining, especially with it when it's to your team, is a release for the frustrations of the workplace. What we do is hard and it's serious. And a lot of times the volume of things coming at us during the day as physicians can be a lot. And so one of the ways to release some of that tension and frustration is when you're coming to the office at the end of the day to write your charts, is to complain a little bit together. Okay. But we're talking about the sweet spot. So if there's a sweet spot, if there's some use to complaining, then there's also a point where you've gone too far and it's not serving you anymore. And I've seen this a lot in my career. And too much feels bad. And I think we all recognize this. But I think the hard part is recognizing like when you've gone over the point and noticing that it feels bad. And that's actually like how. So the question, that I want to answer is, how do you know when you've gone over the sweet spot? And I think really here, the only way to do it is to pay attention. You need to pay attention to how you're feeling and notice if it starts to feel icky. It starts to feel heavy, or you start to feel anxious going into the team room. Sometimes it's you, like you're like, I've been the person like complaining too much, and it's on me to sort of notice that it's bringing down the energy of the group, or you notice that it's someone else. And so what do you do about it? So the one thing is, if it's you, it's time to stop. So I actually caught myself. I was back on the same service just last week. We're working with the same person. We sort of working it out. And I think, I'm learning how to navigate the situation a little bit better. But I came in and I wanted to share something sort of funny, but it's complaining. And I just paused before I said anything, because I realized, I was like, I think I'll be over the sweet spot. And I just need to I need to drop this. And now I just need to this is normal business. And so I didn't say anything, and that was the right call. But I want you to just start practicing a little bit of awareness around this. And that's really the trick. So if it's you, you stop. If it's someone else, and this actually literally just came up before I was walking up the stairs to record this podcast. So in our little group text, so it's like I said, it's a mix. It's an irreverent group. But one person on the thread said, "Hey, there's been a lot of anger in this group lately." And so basically that's what you can do. If you can say, "Hey, this is too much. Stop." And I think my friend's intervention there will probably reel people back, because we get all worked up and we work each other up, and we kind of want to one up and all contribute our complaining things. And when you're over the sweet spot, one of the things you can say is, "Hey, I can't hear this anymore. This is too much. You got to stop." Sometimes that works like a charm, depends on the group. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it's not going to work. This is just a complaining person, super negative. And what I'll do with that is I'll find somewhere else to work. I like my certain seats and all that, but if the tone of the room is too much negative for me, and I had to do this during COVID, the anxiety, it wasn't so much complaining, but the anxiety of the room was too much at times. And so I would go and do what I could to find a spot where I could be out of that. Okay, what else can you do if there's too much complaining? Sometimes the thing to notice and this, we're going to go into this in a whole other episode, but sometimes a lot of complaining means that something is actually wrong and needs to change. And this is where, like, if you find yourself complaining about a situation, you need to think about, is it time to change something in the situation? And we often have way more control than we think we do. So I just want you to ponder that. If there's a lot of complaining, perhaps something needs to change. So I'll leave you with that for today. I hope you find the sweet spot of complaining. And I would love to hear, if you're a teetotaler, maybe you really are on the path to rightness, and I'm totally wrong here. But I am not a teetotaler about complaining, not a teetotaler about gossip either. So anyway, I invite you all to create some satisfaction at work by finding that sweet spot of complaining. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the week. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you like this episode, you're going to love working with me directly. Sign up for email updates from me in the show notes. I'll send you a fun email every week called Friday Favorites. Everyone loves it. Or if you're ready to get started creating your rich and interesting life, book a free consultation with me to explore working together one-on-one. I can't wait to meet you. You'll find these links and other resources in the show notes. See you next week.